Jai Guru, everyone.
Hey Guru.
Hey Guru. Welcome everybody to our next episode of Awake, the Life of Yogananda, Minute by Minute podcast. Today we have reached minute number 34. And as always, I'm joined by Chris and Priyank. How are you doing today, Chris? The jungle behind you looks so nice.
Jungle, yes. Well, don't get too distracted if you see monkeys swinging from the bamboo behind me. But yeah, happy to be here. Always a pleasure. Never a pain. Good to see you guys.
Is that bamboo? Is that bamboo in the back?
That is bamboo in the background. Yeah, it's lovely shade of yellow and green. Nice. It's pretty awesome. You hear it creaking at night time. Very nice.
Nice.
I like the old Chinese proverb, right? Be like the bamboo, bend in the wind, but never break. Right?
So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because sometimes you think it will break, and you're just waiting for the moment of something going crashing down your head when you're sleeping. But yeah, beautiful. You don't have them so much in Northern Ireland, but very sustainable source for material, bamboo.
Yeah.
Now this podcast is going to go on to a level where we're going to discuss what is and what isn't available vegetation-wise from one country to the other.
Or let me tell you what you can make out of bamboo. Okay?
Yeah.
Let me start listening to this 2 hours later. Yeah.
Priyank, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Very tired, but very good.
Excellent.
You'll have to do your energization.
Yeah.
Pull the pranayama in for the podcast break.
Yes.
Very fitting, Chris. Very fitting, because we will talk about this in the episode. So minute number 34. Just a quick summary. We see a large group of people doing energization exercises. You hear Master's voice. He talks about electrocuting disease in your body, recharging it with life energy. Then we have our first appearance of Andrew Newberg, who is a neurologist. We'll talk about him a bit. Then we have Chidananda, who puts the whole thing into context and brings it home and makes a connection with Kriya Yoga and the chakras. Should we first talk a little bit about what does it mean to, or what do you guys feel when Guruji says you recharge the body, you electrocute disease? Is that something you think of? The first thing I thought of when I heard that was the energization exercises. Priyank, what did you think when you heard him say that?
I just really love that line. You don't have to be afraid of germs. If your body is electrified, they'll be electrocuted. Yeah. What that does is so awesome. So simple, isn't it? I really like it, and I use that technique. I was just using it just now, actually. I was electrifying my tiredness, re-energizing myself. The YouTube viewers may have seen. I said I was tired, and Chris reminded me to do energization, so I just did a bit of a mini crash course in energization, and I feel better.
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Do you know, whenever I hear electricity in the body and you're electrifying germs, I'm seeing somebody sticking their finger into a plug socket, thinking, oh, this electricity must be good for me. It's like not this meaning, but it is interesting to think of electricity in the body, energizing the body, and that we are some form of electrical beings. We're in our podcast with Neil Patel. He talked about souls and the magnetism of souls. Some interesting bits there to take away to think about. So it makes me again think of the nature of reality and actually what we're conditioned to think about. The material contents of our body versus what how Yogananda talks about the body being charged with electricity and prana and these sort of things, which is much more. There's a lot more potential in the way that he speaks, which makes my mind work. And I wish I had somebody like Yogananda teach me as a child to think about life, rather than some of the teachers that I had. But it's a very thought-provoking, very awesome statement for this minute.
Yeah, our body is like a fantastic machine that works on all kinds of electricity. And it's pretty fantastic. Like a few hundred years ago, we didn't even know electricity existed, but our bodies must have still used it to function, right? Sri Yukteswar says in the Holy Science that there's like 5 different kinds of electricity in our body, one analog to each of our senses. And I've never really figured out what this really means, but I'm sure our science will catch up with him in due time at some point. All right, and then we move on to the next thing. We have Andrew Newberg in the podcast for in the movie for the first time. He's like a professor, a neurologist. He's at the Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in the US on the East Coast, I think somewhere in Pennsylvania. And he's a very interesting guy. So when I saw him there, we all did our research, we Googled him, and there's one very interesting TED talk that he does. And he talks about finding our enlightened state. And in that podcast, he basically did experiments with people who meditate, who, according to him, go into a deep state of meditation. And then he describes those states of meditation, and we can go through them one by one. But first, in general, Priyan, what did you think about Andrew Newberg when you looked him up?
Yeah, so firstly, he's a fascinating individual, isn't he, in terms of his field of research. And we talked about this topic in the past about the statistical, the objective evidence-based approach onto the impact of meditation. And he seems to have really grabbed this metaphysical bull by the horns in his research through his life. So finally, like, that TED talk that you mentioned, Mike, it really goes into the brain scans and everything like that. And as we'll talk about that in a second, but the first thing he mentioned in this minute, he says he's talking about the energization techniques that we just talked about, and he says everything you do affects your brain. By tensing the muscles, you're activating your frontal lobes. So part of energization, as we know, is tensing and relaxing of muscles, and we might as well just briefly talk about that before we talk about Andrew Newberg in detail. Mike, did you do your energization this morning?
I did. Yes. I thought if there was ever a day where I could do it, today.
Chris, did you do your energization this morning?
Having some technical problems here.
You're doing them right now.
Come back to you on that.
Interestingly, I did a bit of research as to when energization was first used by Yogananda or discovered, and really it's not in any other yoga techniques. This energization that the science is now being talked about by Dr. Newberg, but it's never before in India actually been used or discovered. Yogananda is completely on his own in terms of the discovery and the use and the application of these techniques into our daily practices. So I personally do them every day, and Phil Goldberg in his biography tried to do a bit of research, and it's apparently in 1923 there was the first sort of like quasi mention of these techniques, and I think in the autobiography he mentions as yoga the exercises, doesn't he, the tensing and relaxation. But in 1923 he was giving like an advert for a satsang, and he was releasing a book of poetry called The Songs of the Soul, and with that also there was some things when they were doing that, there were some things sold. The Science of Religion was sold for $1. Psychological Chart for Self-Analysis was sold for 50 cents. And then a 20-page booklet, which was called Yogoda, or Tissue Will System of Physical Perfection, for 10 cents. And that booklet was obviously explains the theory and benefits of the systems that is now called the Energization Exercises. And apparently these instructions were only given only in person. So this was the first mention of energization, and it was called, I'll repeat, Yogoda or tissue will system of physical perfection. And it was only 10 cents. Compared to his talk, which for Science of Religion, which is obviously famous for $1. I think value for money, the 10 cents one, surely. I mean, we could talk about science of religion for years, but it won't really impact our soul. But energization, surely.
I wonder that for a while already, that like when Guruji joined Sri Yukteswar's ashram, did he do the energization exercises there already? Did he do the Om technique or the Hong Sau technique? Because I read that a few times. I read a lesson yesterday briefly, and there it said that as well, that one of the big achievements of Lahiri Mahashaya was that he took all the teachings of ancient India, of the Vedas and of Patanjali, and broke them down in a few simple techniques, right? So I was wondering, was he then referring to Kriya Yoga, the different Kriya Yoga techniques, or was he also talking about the EEs and Hong Sau and Om? But I don't know if we will ever know this.
Well, yeah. There's other lineages, isn't there? So Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship is the principal, lineage that Yukteswar and Lady Masha, etc., have, given to the world. But there are other Swami Harinanda, and there's other groups and mandirs that claim to belong to the same lineage. So it'd be interesting to hear from those devotees there. You can perhaps tell us if energization is in those techniques, for example, or Hong Sau, etc.
There's a note here. I'm just reading the autobiography of a yogi when you guys are talking, and page 100 and 101. Young Mukunda is not well, and he is speaking with Sri Yukteswar, and Sri Yukteswar was saying to him, please do the stomach exercise I've taught you, and that is hoping to heal his illness at the time. So I just wonder, the stomach exercise, we have one in particular, but probably a couple through the lessons to do this sort of thing. So I imagine it is probably something similar.
Yeah, so in energization, there are 2 or 3 exercises that are from Hatha Yoga, but like that rotation of the stomach, that's a common one. But that may not have been the one that Sri Yukteswar was talking about. We obviously don't know. But the whole body of the work and the way that the scientific explanation of the movement of prana into the different limbs and muscles, etc., is completely unique in my literary research.
What about Tai Chi? It's like a few thousand-year-old tradition movement. It's very slow, methodical.
I haven't done it. Have you done it?
No, but I thought it's maybe similar to a sense, because they talk about prana, the chi, the energy coming through the body, and they're motioning this energy through the body. And I would suspect that's something similar, but I don't know if they tense the body like Yogananda talks about, tensing the body, charging the body. But I think it's more of a flow movement. Yeah,
but if you go to that level, then other Hatha Yogas and asanas, it was also on the same level, because it's obviously directing energy and breath and all that to the different focus points.
Yeah, they're probably all related to ancient techniques about life force control that existed thousands of years ago, and those are probably the remainders. And with our very material understanding of today and during the Kali Yuga, we probably focused mostly on the movements and not so much on energy and stuff, because it was a concept that was hard to convey in those times. It's only recently that we regained the vocabulary for it.
Well, apart from in the secret school of spiritual teachings, probably ought to be underground. These mystical schools that Yogananda talked about them, right? You know, these niche groups, you would have known about it.
No,
what is, sorry for asking a stupid question, what is energy?
Question. For me, energy is life force.
What is life force?
Life force that is emanating from the creative, it's the creative source of the universe. You know, whenever I think about it, I think of like the origins, like we talk about, you know, the universe, that in the Bible, first the verse is the word, and the word was with God, and God was the word, or something along that line. So the the original vibrational tone, this is, you know, propelled throughout the universe. It's a question I can't answer, but that's like my input. It's like this fundamental underlying creative force. I don't know. Is probably the correct answer. Mike.
Very, very difficult to answer. Because energy is oftentimes one of the building blocks. When I want to explain something else, I usually use it's a kind of energy or something. But energy itself is, maybe you can say it is like you used first your willpower, right? And your willpower then turns, I don't know what it turns into energy, but it creates a kind of momentum to make something happen, and maybe you can call that energy. But I don't think that's a very good explanation.
You might have multiple layers of what we consider energy to be, and it can be finer and finer in terms of your definition. So energy in the body, you know, you might think of, you know, the sugar, the, you know, various aspects there, and then electricity, and, you know, the finer, as it goes finer and finer. Yogananda talked about lifetrons, right? And that isn't something that, you know, we obviously talk about in this day and age, but like what is an atom and what is, you know,
but it's so amazing that we kind of say energy and everyone has an idea of what it is now. And hundreds of years ago, you would say it and nobody knew what it was. So that's kind of shows that our evolution is coming along.
I don't think most people think about it as like, if you would say, like Prince said, he's tired, maybe he has no energy. And that's usually like, oh, I just need to drink like an energy drink, or, you know, I need to, you know, something along those lines, which is like a substance. But I think we're talking about it in more fundamental aspects.
Do you have
context?
Do you have a good answer, Priyank, for what is energy?
He's the engineer.
I think some well, if the engineering answer is, oh, it's a unit of measure for joule, and the unit of energy
MC squared.
The principle of energy, that's a different thing, but the fundamental is joule. You know, a joule is a unit of energy, and a joule is the amount of work done in any, you know, movement, etc. So that's a really basic physicsy answer, but here we're talking about energy in a much deeper way, aren't we? We're talking about creation and the source and meaning, and, you know, how we connect to it in our meditation, and how we use it, and, you know, in a way that's not just, for example, moving an object from A to B, but actually raising our life energy. So you know, and we're doing that mentally, you know, if that's even possible. And that this obviously relates a little bit to what the TED talk or Andrew Newberg talks about. But I think this is something that's best not answered through words, because you know we would all struggle to define what energy is, but we know, don't we? Inside we know that what is and what isn't energy, what the impact of being energized is, what the impact of being low on energy, and moving our energy away from senses. You know, we experience these when we practice the technique. So in our heart, we know what energy is, but when you put anything, or the deepest concepts in the world, when you put them into words, it doesn't do justice, is it? That's why poetry is such a powerful and potent tool, because in poetry you can describe something that is not in, it's not logical, it's not something that's easily logically understood, it's much more subtle.
Sorry, just in case we change subject, I wanted to say there's a couple of things that come to mind, and one is the story of Yogananda, where he was, he'd been working or traveling, and correct me on the details of the story, over a course of time, and he still had to wait for other guests to arrive as to where he was, and they arrived quite late because they were delayed. So they arrived in the middle of the night or something, and being a good host, he still got up and made them food. And I think somebody was there butchering the story, but the moral of the story is that he really got up, even though he probably was exhausted, and managed to put on a full spread of food for his guests. And he was then said, look, I think it was Sri Yukteswar said, you're never going to be kind of hassled by the having lack of energy or something like this. You're always going to have it. I think about that story a lot. It's on my mind, like, what is it really something we can simply break away from? And obviously Yogananda is extremely advanced, but I often think about it in moments of being tired, but can I just like get over this by now? Because how great a willpower must you have to be able to break away from such a bodily consequence, I guess, of using your doing actions and thinking and using up your energy.
I feel like it gets easier, like Guruji often says that, like taking on the bodily inertia full on is very difficult. It becomes easier if you elevate your consciousness. The less you think you are the body, the easier it becomes to break all those habits and all those chains of being in the flesh. He says sometimes that like it's easier for children, for example, to overcome those kind of habits because they are not yet as much in the flesh as like an adult that is constantly nervous. And so I feel like that's kind of one of the keys. If you try cold turkey now to do everything perfectly and always go against all your bad habits, then you will probably lose. But you have to gradually elevate the consciousness, I think.
You'll end up mangled underneath the carriages. How is it put in the Bhagavad Gita? When you try to fight the senses head on, you end up just getting crushed. You just end up like a mangled mess after the course of life is taking its toll. But I think on a similar note, my other thought was, how much endless energy do you have for the things that you're excited about or really enthused with? You kind of have endless energy for it because it must be some kind of magnetism. It just draws that energy in naturally, versus if you're stuck or labored with some task that you really could not be bothered to do, and it's just the time drags, doesn't it? Time drags. You have low energy for it. We probably all experience that in some way. So it's interesting, that relationship between interest and if your awareness is fully given to something, you're concentrating on something, time flies and you always have tons of energy, versus your mind's wandering, you're not focused, or your attention is not on something, and the time drags and you have you're low energy. So something to that, right? Being in the flow of life, having energy, etc., etc.
Absolutely. I think so too. That I feel like Guruji, he talks about this, like oftentimes like being a problem in his own life, especially in his youth, right? That he, like you said, that one story where he overcame fatigue, but also, especially in the beginning of the autobiography, he talks about a lot of the little habits that kept holding him back and stuff, and how he overcame them one by one. And I feel like that's kind of, for us, relatable, right? That we have to, he's basically the Arjuna of the autobiography of a yogi, where he like shows us how to get out of this kind of world of creation. What do you guys think? Should we start dissecting this TED Talk by Andrew Newberg?
Yeah, I think we definitely should. Definitely. I think sorry, I kind of changed the subject when you asked me that question, but I think it was all very relevant to everything he talked about. He talked about, and I think something pretty cool about his definition of enlightenment. Mike, do you remember what it was? It wasn't a basic thing.
No, I actually don't know. So
he was kind of saying that the experience of enlightenment is different. It's not just the spiritual one that we speak of as Buddha. It's an experience that you can have in scientific research, and it's an experience you can have when you have a state of infinite doubt. So he talks about it in many different contexts, and then he talks about like the feeling, the characteristics of enlightenment. So for example, he talks about people that are in this state. He'd actually put probes in them, and we have to obviously take this with a pinch of salt, because we don't have many people that are self-realized beings that especially not that he would have access to in his research, but he can certainly talk about do some measurements. And he said when people are in these states, there's few different parameters that really show up heavily. For example, intensity, clarity of feeling, unity, that feeling of underlying unity, and that feeling of surrender. So he talks about all of these, and then he talks about he actually analyzes brain scans. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah. So he takes those kind of I would say experiences that you just mentioned, and then he underlies each of them with a brain scan and an area of the brain that he finds is relevant and how it affects that area of the brain. And that is so interesting. And the first one you said is intensity. And I'm going to talk about myself now. So when I meditate, I oftentimes, when it goes really well, I feel a sense of peace, and I feel a sense of I just wouldn't call it intensity. So there has like one person that he interviewed, and he says for him it is like taking an infinite roller coaster of white light, which sounds amazing. When you go down a roller coaster and there's this feeling of no gravity, right? And you have this for infinity, and you fall into a white light like this. It sounds like an amazing experience. I haven't experienced this so far, but I'm looking forward to it, definitely. And he says that there is one part of the brain that lights up when you experience strong emotion, any kind of emotion, really. And he says that this signifies intensity, and that lights up during an enlightened state. And I find that fascinating. So Chris, have you experienced this yet?
All I can say is I think the general practice is don't talk about your experiences, because I think it might influence other people's little monkey mind. And
can you talk about your lack? Can you talk about your lack of experiences?
Like
all day. We don't have time for it. I think this is a very interesting subject. Obviously, we could talk about it all day, but we talked about this, I think, the last time, with Neil Patel, having experience, or no, before that actually, maybe in the last minute, having an experience that's very significant early on in your meditative, I almost want to say career, but I'm too business-minded. That's the problem. Whenever you start to meditate, you get into it, and you kind of get this glimpse, like a real beautiful glimpse of, like you said, sensations of peace, tranquility, maybe experience something, and then it's not pulled away from you, but you got to work really hard to keep it going. There's probably an endless amount of experiences out there that an endless amount of people have had. This sounds in particular quite thought-provoking to have a roller coaster of a white light. Yogananda talks about white light descending on you as opposed to a roller coaster. So maybe the person's mixing this with emotions, or something's happening there. But no, I can't say I've personally had a roller coaster of white light experience.
Priyanka, are you riding the white light roller coaster?
No. But it's been a beautiful journey, and the roller coaster is usually a fleeting experience, isn't it? Whereas what I think is more significant is this difficult to describe. It's if you can sustain that roller coaster and actually get over the thrill and the joy and just enjoy the calm state. You know, the bit of the roller coaster that's flat. It's not like you don't leave your stomach up at the top as you usually do, you know, when you're going at 10 Gs or whatever the acceleration is. Yeah, because it's easy when you're in that state, it's easy to become, you know, ecstatic and overjoyed. But can you do it when there's nothing happening? You know, life's just ticking along and doing all the things you have to do in your life.
Absolutely.
Yogananda talks about the different sounds at the different chakras. I'm not sure how much detail is in the public sphere about this, but the ocean noise of the top chakra it can be quite intimidating from what I hear. And the idea there is like, well, you know, there's a transition phase to, as you said, Priyanka, beyond that I've heard other people talk about. They said that they get scared when these things happen, and they get too analytical about what's happening rather than the surrendering of allowing the experience to kind of go beyond, you know, the initial, as you said, excitement. I 100% agree with you there. I've heard other people say, like, in particular with this noise of the ocean, it's quite overpowering at times and overwhelming. So, you know, if anybody's listening and is having a music experiences, you know,
yeah,
I think
right.
Relax. Yeah, right. Let's talk to us. We want to know.
Yeah. The one thing that I heard here, but also in many other cases, oftentimes in relation to near-death experiences, is that they experience it as more real than regular life, which I find fascinating. So they experience something, they're in their everyday life, and it's like in an internal process, but for them, it's more real than our life. And that points to that whole notion that our material life is a dream, right? And when we wake up from this on the next level, we feel something is more real. Find that fascinating.
I heard something funny about this. I'll share just to caveat some of these concepts that we're talking about, because I think there is like some very real elements as we all have faith. I think fundamentally that, you know, this is true, even though we may not have had some direct experience with it beyond the material world, that is. There are people that talk about near-death experiences on operating tables quite often. And often you would say, they would say, I saw the light, you know, I was kind of going towards the light, and this idea of this descending light. And the kind of retort to this is, on an operating table, the one thing that you have is a very bright, big light over the person's body, like shining on them. So the idea is that, well, of course you're going to see a light because there's a big bright light over your head. And so apparently I don't know if all operating tables do this. I guess not operating theaters, but they put a note above the light to say that if you can read this, you know, if you're having an out-of-body experience and you're looking down on your body, there's a note to kind of say something there so that they can report back on it. So yeah, there's obviously lots of, like, it's a very murky kind of space when you talk about out-of-body experiences and seeing lights, and it's very skeptical mystical kind of space, but there's a lot of beautiful stories out there as well. Pretty awesome stories.
There is a show on Netflix at the moment. I forgot what it's called, something about out-of-body experiences. I only watched the first episode, but it's very interesting. There was like a person in Switzerland who in the 1800s who was a rock climber, and he fell off a mountain at some point and was in a kind of deathless state, or not, I wouldn't say not deathless. What is it called? In a kind of
limbo.
Limbo for a while. And he said he left his body and he saw himself, but then eventually he went back into the body and woke up. And he then asked other people and he noticed that there were other people who were also climbing mountains who had similar experiences, because apparently it's a dangerous thing. And so he wrote them all down in a book. And to this day, there's so many accounts of people leaving their body at certain times, and still we don't believe it, right? Like the scientific consensus is they're all hallucinating. They're all having some weird dreams, even though it's, in my opinion, pretty clear that this is kind of the proof that we are not the body. We're also not the astral body, but at least we leave the body as our astral body. We see other people, and it's very comforting to hear that they all tell a similar story, right? And we have the story from so many sources, and still at the moment we choose not to believe it. What do you guys make of that?
I do find this subject very interesting. All I can say is I read a book, and I'm trying to think desperately of the name. I can't, but maybe some of the readers may have read this book as well, by a lady who was, I think, British Chinese. She was born and raised in Hong Kong. She ended up getting cancer, riddled all of her body very, very bad, and she died in hospital. And she had this out-of-body experience, and she was able to come back. She cured herself of cancer. Her body miraculously recovered. And then, sorry, everybody's frozen, so I don't know if my internet connection's dropped.
No, it hasn't.
I think so.
No, you're good.
Oh, my internet connection went there. Sorry, I was saying the lady had this out-of-body experience. She was able to say that she saw her brother on a plane flying over to see her when nobody else knew that he was on the plane. She was able to say that there was a conversation out of the room, down the hall, and in another room of her husband speaking to the doctor. And she was able to recall the conversation, as well as conversations in the room and a couple other things or something. And so it was this pretty undeniably insane kind of story to be able to recount things. And that really kind of changed my perspective on it. And she goes around giving talks on her experience and things like this. So yeah, there's really interesting stories out there that are very, very difficult or impossible to deny. And I suppose there's only going to be more and more of these stories confirming your belief.
Priyank, do you have anything on the subject?
Yeah, I have this it's just this experience in the back of my mind of seeing things from like a bird's eye view. And it kind of describes what people see, what you just described about the operating theatre and coming out and looking down. There's just this underlying, probably not making any sense. It's this underlying feeling of like the deeper I look, then I'm seeing further and further away from myself, as it were. And I think you don't need to wait for, what I'm trying to suggest is you don't need to wait for a near-death experience or an operating theatre to experience that unity or that broaden your field of view or your horizon. You can do it yourself through your own practices, and I think it will come pretty naturally if you just deepen your practices. You go on.
Maybe Frank, this is why you're so tired. You're too busy flying around your astral form.
Flying around, and it may well have been like a recurring dream that I have, and hence I like can feel this in the back of my consciousness, but I don't know where it's from, but it's there.
Can I just add one more thing that I heard that I thought was interesting in similar sort of frame? Was Sadhguru, again referring to our dear friend Sadhguru, was talking about people referring to astral travel, and I know this idea about astral travel, which is kind of what we're talking about here, I guess. And he sort of said most of it's just imagination. Most of it is just that overactive minds, and you're simply needing to ground yourself more, et cetera, et cetera. Because the actual act of astral travel requires so much energy and consolidated effort. It really takes somebody quite advanced to do it, but yet you see thousands of these stories popping up, and I think he was saying like most of them don't really hold much water, but it is true, you can do this, but it requires so much effort and energy that it's an inefficient thing to do unless you really kind of need to, mastery over the cities and things like this. So it kind of takes somebody who's very advanced, and it's not very efficient, even if you were able to do it. So yeah, I kind of have a bit more of a grounded perspective of it now. I haven't heard that, because you don't really know what to believe, and I believe it a lot more that there's just a lot of people out there with overactive imaginations.
Could be.
Cool. So that was the first experience that people had. That was intensity. The second one was clarity. I'm getting distracted by this cat. Thank you.
This is Ying. He also has a brother called Yang.
Hello.
Big boy.
Clarity was, so the way he describes it is there is one part of the brain that is responsible for constructing the reality as we perceive it, basically our idea of Maya, right? And he says clarity means that this area becomes less active. So basically our brain deconstructs our perception of reality, and hence we feel clarity. That's another beautiful thought. And I love how he underlines this with like scientific jargon and also the brain scans. What did you think about that, Priyank, when you saw that?
Yeah, pretty deep stuff, isn't it? I love how he's able to talk about these concepts without bringing any like yoga or spirituality. It's just, it feels like it's just one branch of scientific study that is like obvious and you'd naturally be doing it, but it's the way the language he's using and the concepts he's talking about are really profound, aren't they? And he's unique in his delivery. That's unique in the scientific community, how he's talking about it. So no wonder he's in the Awake film.
There's another guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza. Super guy, got a book called Becoming Supernatural, and he does deep studies into this as well. I think Mike, maybe you know a little bit about this guy, but it's fascinating and inspiring to see this language coming into the spiritual context. Whenever I Googled his name, by the way, I saw that people also ask, what is spiritual neuroscience? And it's the neuroscience of religion, also known as neurotheology. And as spiritual neuroscience attempts to explain religious experience and behavior in neuroscientific terms. So it's a new-ish thing, I suppose, and something that's going to get more and more attention and more investment over the coming years. So it's going to really take off. So it's really cool to see. But it did make me think, I wonder, can these guys, how would you say, induce a spiritual experience, through electro transmitters of sorts, can actually induce the experience.
It would be cool, right? I mean, I have my doubts, but I mean,
Can they hack meditation? Meditation?
Hack me in there, yes.
All you have to do is kind of hook yourself up to electrodes and
you just
off you go.
to pay for it, and then you go into.
Even if they could, you'd be a brave person to drill,
Yes.
wouldn't you? Because you wouldn't know what the impact, long-term impact would be.
I was more thinking about karma, maybe.
Oh, that's another thing, yeah.
Why do you mess with something that maybe karmically you're going to get slammed back onto the ground?
Because generally any shortcut in life is usually ends up being a long cut, doesn't it?
That's what it would probably be akin to like a drug or something, right? Where you become addicted to it or whatnot.
Yeah, 100%. But really interesting to see this these terms used, and whenever you practice meditation, you can relate to everything that he's saying, right? So, okay, so that's how that works, and there's a biochemical reaction happening during meditation. It helps explain. I've heard it actually talk about in terms of the beta theta brainwave signals, right? So you drop into the brainwave, what's the lowest one? I think theta or something, and that is when you go into the zone. And that, meditation, the longer you can stick in that zone, the concentration, the longer your meditation. That's, but you can really quite clearly see the drops in other studies I've read. So yeah, it's a super exciting time.
I wonder if when Andrew's meditating, all he's doing is looking forward to the results or the scans, as opposed to enjoying the meditation.
That's why the emotions are flaring.
He'll get like a meditation report afterwards. So
well, today
89% accuracy.
Yeah.
What he said, and Frank, you read this out earlier about, was it tensing the body, doing the energization techniques, stimulates the frontal lobe, and that reduces stress and anxiety, and it relaxes you. It's interesting because that's what people say meditation does for them. Oh, I meditate, it relaxes me, it does, does these things. So I guess you, in a sense, then wouldn't need the energization exercises to have that similar reaction. But it's good to see the stepping stones are there for most people. They can at least experience that first level of relaxation and stress reduce. So it's good to see that at least is accessible.
So now we have intensity, clarity. The third experience was unity. And he just underlies this again. He says there's a part of the brain that is responsible for the construct of ourselves, how we perceive ourselves as ourselves. You could maybe call it like our identification with the body, right? And he says that becomes less active and you feel a sense of unity. Again, amazing. I found this like, I love how this corresponds with the things we hear from Guruji in so many different ways. And this is like affirming kind of what we thought all along, but in a scientific way. So that's why I love it.
Yeah. Hong Sa. I mean, this technique is used, in many forms, and I know again Sadhguru is using "I'm not the body, I'm not the mind" breathing techniques, pranayama, which is kind of similar to what we do with Hong Sa, breathe in, breathe out, and it's funny actually. I did this with my fiance's dad, and he was kind of saying, "Well, why would you want to say that you're not the body and not the mind? Like, why do you see yourself as detached? Surely that's an insult to creation itself." But I find that perspective interesting because we're certainly taught that these are simply different in SRF, and that whenever you see them as different, you can detach and observe the effects of them. So
the problem is not it's not that, it's that you see yourself as you're only this body or you're only this mind. That's the bigger problem, isn't it? And that's what that's actually the insulting part, isn't it? Because then you limit your ability to call some person on the street your brother, because no, that's his body. My body is here. That's his mind. My body is mine. And similarly, like if sending out good vibrations of peace and collective. People say like group meditations are good because like they focus everyone's efforts and like there's support. Everyone helps each other. So it's like it almost becomes like a collective mind. But if you were like this is my mind and I'm only this mind, then that possibility is not there for you, is it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the underlying idea that we are all one is like a theoretical concept, until you hear that actually there's a part of the brain that kind of is also in charge of telling you that you are the body. And if you make it less active, then you feel a sense of unity.
What does Hong So mean, Chris?
I am, I think, is it?
I am he.
I'm he, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. the father. Sorry, Greg, you go first. I'm going to go off topic slightly.
Yeah. So Sadhguru's Isha Kriya is what he is described as. I'm not the body and I'm not the mind. And if you're not either of those things, then clearly you are that which is the divinity. But Sadhguru and Sadhguru is pretty unique. Actually, he doesn't talk about any deity or God, really. He only talks about things in logical deductive terms. So Yogananda talks directly about God and he says, I am he, I am God, is the mantra. Or in Sadhguru's terms, he doesn't want to say that, but so he'll say what you're not. I am not the body, I am not the mind, but what's left, that's what's left, right? You can only be part of that infinite divinity.
Very true. Yeah, didn't think about it like that. I think I was going to say, Mike, actually, you mentioned there about the unity and the recognition. I'm sorry, I think I'm breaking up with my internet connection.
You're good.
The monkeys must be playing with the router again. Monkeys. Is Edward Schrodinger, I think, is to be the father of quantum mechanics. He said, concluded rather, that all minds are one. And that was really significant in the world of Western science, to say that, well, what is the mind stuff? Well, all minds it's actually coming from one source. So all thoughts come from one source ultimately. And that sort of pointed towards this unity of mind in a sense.
Yeah, Erwin Schrödinger, Austrian guy.
Yeah. So. Are you related?
Most famous for his cat.
Yeah. Do you remember Schrödinger's cat?
Yeah.
No. Why? What does he have?
Mike, describe Schrödinger's cat, Mike.
I can't describe it very well. It's like the cat in a box or something, and it's at the same time in the box and not in the box or something, right?
No. So I think what it is like. So you have a box and you put a cat. So Chris, take Ying and get a box. Get an Amazon box. Just use Amazon box. Yeah.
Other boxes are available.
Yeah. Okay. Any other box? A bamboo box will do as well. So get one of those boxes. Come on, let's see you do it. We can do this experiment.
No.
I promise. He liked it.
I promise Ying won't get hurt, but your brain your mind may get hurt. Anyway, so what happens is, say we had Ying and we put Ying in a box and we put a vial of poison also in that box. Yeah. Now, so for the observer who's outside the box, we don't know what's gone on inside the box. So the cat could have broken that vial of poison and therefore be dead, or he may not have broken that vial of poison and may be alive. So to the observer, both statements are true. He can either be dead or be alive. We don't know. So then he deduced that equally he can be both dead and alive.
Yeah,
I suppose
some
so, yeah.
crass. There's a pretty crass explanation of that.
Yeah,
Probably really deep concept.
He used that to explain quantum superposition or something like that, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So just because you can't see what's happening means that anything could happen.
Both states are equally true. Can be equally true. Anyway, let's move on before we blow my.
We'll talk about this for half an hour.
Yeah, like it's actually pretty good because similar to quantum mechanics, like one of the good qualities is to surrender, right? And that is the fourth quality that he mentioned, surrender. And there is also, like Guruji tells us, the part behind the forehead of the brain is like the center of willpower. And so also Andrew Newberg says that is the part that lights up when you use your will to do something. And in this meditative enlightened state, it's the opposite. This part becomes less active and you surrender to it, which again, it's like a confirmation, like all those four states and the brain scans, they kind of confirm what I was expecting to happen in our brains while we are meditating. And I kind of find that very reassuring.
Yeah, thou art there, not I. So that's kind of what surrender means to me, right? It's like the recognition that, you know, you're essentially the witness to the doing in some ways, and you know, you use your will to kind of choose the doing. It's one that actually the surrendering, from a personal sharing perspective, it's very useful to remember to surrender, to give up your thoughts, words, actions to God, as it were, to recognize that it isn't you. So it's lovely that he highlights that, because it is a very important part, in my mind, in spiritual journey, taking away the ego attachment. Awesome. I can see why it's in the documentary.
Surrender is also quite important facet for marriage as well.
Thanks for the tip. You know, tomorrow I'm getting my marital documents signed, so you know, I'll keep that in mind.
Thy will be done, not mine. Thou art the doer, not I.
You have will, yeah. No, very, very important part. Yeah, it's part of a man's journey.
No, but surrender is actually such a deep concept, and it's a meditation in itself. So you know how like some people can just sit and think about something for hours or days even. Surrender is that one concept that I think you could surrender to, that stillness. You could surrender to your mind, surrender your mind. There's so many different meditations in that single word, more than the dictionary. The Oxford English Dictionary probably have like 8 words as a description of what surrender is, but in our metaphysics, the surrender is as infinite as the ocean, isn't it?
Probably going to be used in some militaristic and surrender whenever you stop fighting. But I suppose it is, isn't it? Stop fighting this idea of separation.
Stop resisting to an enemy or opponent and submit to their authority. 1, 2, 3, 4.
British definition.
Very
12 words. It is
militaristic kind of formulation.
Surrender is when you surrender everything to Britain. Yeah, everything you own. Yeah.
You take the ego out, right, and then it becomes much easier to surrender. Easier said than done.
Yeah, I guess that's what you're surrendering, your ego.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm fasting today, so today I surrendered food.
Oh, you have one? I'll have mine tomorrow. So
nice.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Nice. All right, so let's move on from Andrew Newberg. The next scene you see YSS monk meditating on like what I think is a pile of pipes. You identified him as Swami Smaranananda Priyank. What do you know about him?
Swami Smaranananda, he's a very, 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 very popular monk in India, in Yoga Satsang Society, and he's an eminent one as well. So he comes from a vast scientific and academic background, and he joined as a youth, joined YSS and became a monk. And he's very eminent. So he talks on the news. He gives public talks, government, in schools and universities. Is really, really eminent. And he's a very senior monk as well. So he's like on the board of directors or vice president or something like that of YSS. And I remember his one talk that he gave at a convocation, and this CD is available. It's called Deepening Our Practice of Meditation. And it was just absolutely phenomenal. I really highly recommend that anyone that wants to deepen their meditation, which is probably all of us, you listen to that talk. I can give a
can we link to that in the description below?
I'll put it in the talk. Yeah, I'll put it in the description.
YouTube.
But let me if you want, I can talk just a little bit about just a little snippet of that talk I've actually got here. So he relates a story. So he says, a person was walking in a graveyard at night. It was dark, the path was not clear, and he fell into a deep ditch. He tried and tried, but could not get out. So he resigned himself to spend the night in the ditch. He sat in the corner of the ditch. A little later, another person fell also into the same ditch. He also tried to get out, but could not do so. The first person decided to have a little fun at the expense and changed his voice into a deep level and says, I know you cannot get out tonight. The second man thought it was a ghost. He made a major effort and got out. And then he found the motivation to scramble out of the ditch. And then he describes this, he describes the explanation, and he tells the story much better than I've just read out. He obviously enunciates and makes it into quite a funny one, as Mike was laughing there, but it's much funnier when he says it. Anyway, so he describes that, he says that he relates the story to our lives. He says, nobody wants to spend the night with a ghost, but we all do. The ghost of disappointment is around the corner. The ghost of disease, the ghost of misunderstanding, frustration, they're all waiting. Why wait for a calamity to strike you to start thinking about God? We start right now. That is the only way we can hope to live without tension and fears. Lord Krishna said, even a little practice of this religious rite will save you from dire fears. So he's a very, very eminent monk, and there's a really good picture of him meditating on pipes. What a random picture.
I think it must be, they must have chosen that specifically because I think the idea behind it must have been to say, like, you can meditate anywhere. If I can meditate on, construction, big, large pipe work used in construction, you can meditate anywhere. And he looks, head raised. He's deep in concentration. It's thought provoking to that. That's where my mind would go. Sometimes you can come up with excuses as to why you shouldn't meditate, but it's a good snapshot.
He looks so relaxed there. He had like perfect asana there. It doesn't look like he's uncomfortable. He could probably do this for hours. What he's doing there.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike. I've walked past my bedroom when you stayed with me a few nights, and I saw you meditating in a similar position on the bed.
I don't know why.
Hanging off.
I got used to that at some point to just use my pillow and sit on it and meditate. I don't know.
I do the same, yeah.
I was always impressed because I can never meditate on my bed, but you somehow are doing it with infinite ease.
Sleeping at the same time is magical.
Wherever, it is funny, sometimes, like, you know, I have like a meditation corner and I meditate there often. And then sometimes I just feel like I don't want to meditate there tonight. I want to meditate on my sofa, use one of the cushions there, or on my bed, or it's like that. I say, like, as long as I meditate, I don't care where I meditate. So I'm fine.
Of course, it's strong within you. Yeah, but it is quite interesting to talk about places to meditate, because there's the anchorage of the energy from where you meditate regularly, and you can go in to meditation more quickly. I think that's the idea behind it, isn't it? So if anybody's listening and getting into meditation, try to get that spot in the room, somewhere quiet or wherever you can do it. Try to go there repeatedly. Get build and build.
Yeah, it's also about just forming that habit, and it trains your mind. So then if you enter that space, then you then associate that space with meditation, just like, you know, we all do with when we go to work or put on our suits. We would think, oh, now we're going to work, we're here in work mode, and we become all professional. And similarly, you can use the same psychological tricks. And obviously there must be some energy significance as well, obviously, to creating a vibration of energization, energy.
Exactly. I feel like when you meditate, there's always a part of Maya that is trying to keep you from meditating. And it goes like, oh yeah, you I don't know. And it's sometimes it keeps me from sitting in my meditation corner. And then I just say, I'll meditate here, I don't care.
Screw you, Maya.
Yeah, like you have to trick your mind sometimes.
Nice.
Again, Yogananda talks about this, to throw, isn't it, cotton, has to be 100% cotton feet, you know, and meditate upon that, because it breaks the currents of Maya.
Insulate yourself,
Insulate yourself from the cosmic currents, right? Yeah.
From all the noise.
I hardly
listen to bamboo in Brazil.
I should probably do that more often. I hardly ever do that.
Never dive with them.
Yeah. So then you see Swami Smaranananda. And then when Andrew Newberg is done talking, Chidananda takes over and kind of connects it all, right? He talks about Kriya Yoga. He talks about the chakras as our instruments of perception in the spine that become receptive and we awaken them. And there's a part in the autobiography that I would like to read. Chris, do you mind reading that?
Sorry, I don't know if you asked me a question, but my internet connection.
Oh, sorry.
I'll read it, Chris.
Yes.
Mike, the first one.
I didn't hear.
The one in the chakras card.
Okay, chakras card. Yes, I can read that. The Kriya Yogi mentally directs his life energy to revolve upward and downward around the 6 spinal centers: the medullary, cervical, dorsal, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal plexuses, which correspond to the 12 astral signs of the zodiac. The symbolic cosmic man. 1.5 minute of revolution of energy around the sensitive spinal cord of man effects subtle progress in his evolution. That 1/2 minute of Kriya equals 1 year of natural spiritual unfoldment.
Speaking of airplane routes to the infinite, right? It is like when you just read that, and when you it just all starts making sense in the context of Kriya Yoga and in the sense of awakening the energy in the spine.
Yeah, when I first heard this, it made me super excited, and there is some kind of crystallizing moment to say, this is why I'm here. Like, this is what we come for. Are we not entertained? But this is really genuinely like the the purpose, if there is a purpose to life, is to get back to source. And this is such a gift and technique that we have access to. Again, sorry, I think I've frozen.
No, you haven't.
I think I froze again. Or, no, I'm back. Or you guys froze. Okay, sorry, I didn't know what was going on. So yeah, it's just such a gift and technique. So when I heard this, I was like, there's beautiful mathematics to how it works. And again, all the videos are frozen, so I'm going to stop talking now because I don't know if I'm actually talking to someone.
No, it's good.
Guruji adds this whole other concept in there of, he compares it to the zodiac signs, and then he would later go on and say that the same way the zodiac signs are our outer universe, the chakras are our inner universe, and the same way the sun, our planet revolves around the sun, our chakras revolve around the spiritual eye. And it's like, you read this and there's so many things I read and my eyes get like this, and I go like, oh my God, I want to know all of this. Because it is very interesting. But I think I think we could have a whole episode just on this, just on the chakras and awakening them. Yeah.
Special.
We'll never finish the awake minute by minute.
We just keep doing specials.
2030, minute 60.
Yeah, it might also be more difficult to find a specialist on the chakras.
We could also go back as well, Chris. So for whatever reason, having to apply Schrodinger's equations.
Are you even here, Greg? Or
yes.
You're actually in my laptop at the same time in London.
Right. And then let's go a bit more into. So obviously this excerpt was from the autobiography of a yogi, from the chapter "The Science of Kriya Yoga," and let's go a bit more into Kriya Yoga. Chris, do you mind reading the first section in the Science of Kriya Yoga card?
So this is from the autobiography of a yogi. Kriya Yoga is simple. Psychophysiological method by which human blood is decarbonated and recharged with oxygen. The atoms of this extra oxygen are transmuted into life current to rejuvenate the brain and spinal centers. By stopping the accumulation of venous blood, the yogi is able to lessen or prevent the decay of tissues. The advanced yogi transmutes his cells into energy. What is energy? I hear you ask. We'll come back to that, I suppose. Elijah, Jesus, Kabir, and other prophets were masters in the use of Kriya or other similar technique, by which they caused their bodies to materialize and dematerialize at will.
Nice. So without revealing the technique, he teases it a little bit, talks about what it does. One thing that I find super interesting is that it recharges our body with life force, but at the same time, there is a material process going on where oxygen goes into the blood. So basically, to the recharging of energy, there's a correspondent material process where oxygen goes into our blood, stops our tissues from decaying. Basically, we can stop aging like this. What do you think about that?
Mike, you're actually 60, aren't you? You just so happen to look like a 20-something-year-old man.
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's, we mentioned before, like how Chris was saying that some people, get the benefits of energization just through meditating, and here if you do it really properly, then you'd get the benefits of energization just doing Kriya. And it's described here how people would get the benefits of energization just by meditating properly, I suppose. And some people accidentally stumble across a powerful technique, and others are given it.
Mm-hmm.
So the connection with the breath and breathing in oxygen, the carbonating process. It's been a while since I've done biology. You really know that basic stuff. It's interesting because we're carbon life forms, and I've heard that if you look at animals and the frequency of their breath and then their lifespan, how do we sit? Are we heavy breathers, rapid breathers? What does that do to our heart rate? What stress and effects does that have on the body? Look at Babaji. He's someone, an avatar, who has went beyond the state of birth and death. And does he breathe at all? I have no idea. But I imagine if he does, it's a very, very, very low rate of breath. The heart rate's very low. And so that's something practical that we can keep in mind. Keep our awareness on the breath, at all times, because it really helps stabilize our mental state and emotional states. And I find multiple times if I'm feeling a little bit too hyped, feeling a little bit too, whatever it might be, control the breath. And the key is, there's really cool techniques, is that simply to breathe out first. And I know we get taught a lot of things, with SRF, but make sure to expel the air before breathing. I think it's a fascinating subject, and again, we could probably spend an entire hour on this. But it's a beautiful exercise to do, and gives you so much more control over your life. That is a very simple, overlooked, underrated aspect of living. It's incredible.
I like one of the things you said about different animals having different breathing speeds. I think I read somewhere that giant tortoise is like the slowest breather we have, and that's why it reaches
400 years,
hundreds of years. I wonder if through the yugas, man's breath slows down and hence we live longer. That would be an interesting aspect of going through the yugas. Then there's another short section of the autobiography here that I want to read. And it says, the yogi arrests decay in the body by securing an additional supply of prana, life force, through quieting the actions of the lungs and heart. He also arrests mutations of growth in the body by controlling apana, the eliminating current. Thus, neutralizing decay and growth, the yogi learns life force control, which I feel like this kind of underscores that point you just made, that you keep healthy, stable, and the last section that we have here, Priyank, do you want to read that? Because
sure.
that underscores another point.
1,000 kriyas practiced in 8.5 hours gives the yogi in one day the equivalent of 1,000 years of natural evolution, 365,000 years of evolution in 1 year. In 3 years, a Kriya yogi can thus accomplish by intelligent self-effort the same result that nature brings to pass in 1,000,000 years. The Kriya shortcut, of course, can only be taken by deeply developed yogis with the guidance of a guru. Such yogis have carefully prepared their body and brain to withstand the power generated by intensive practice.
Amazing. Yeah, so I love the numbers that you have in there, that you can just say, if you practice one Kriya correctly, you already have so and so many times of natural evolution, and you can just speed up your evolution so tremendously. So it's a great motivation to practice.
Chris was intense in his practice, and he's decided to
Chris went into samadhi, so he
take samadhi. Yeah, that's right. And interestingly, some words that Andrew Newberg used are in there, aren't they? Intensity. Yeah, I'm sure surrender's in there somewhere.
Yes. So I think this wraps up our minute pretty well, Priyank. Is there anything you want to add still?
Nope, I think that's good. It's been a good minute. Scientific discussion, the second of scientific discussion compared to the one we had with Anita Goel.
Nice. Yeah, Chris is back. Chris joined us again. We were just about to wrap up the minute. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you know, my recap, my thinking on this minute is there's such a depth of knowledge that we can go into, and it just is what we've said before is you know, whenever you pick apart this documentary minute by minute, you could probably make, you know, dozens of other documentaries just on the back of it. And this is just a super interesting one, and inspires me to, you know, go double down on my energization techniques, and yeah, it's beautiful. So nothing more to add for me, but I really enjoyed it.
Perfect. All right, then I thank you guys, and
thank you very much.
Our minute 34.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.